The morning had begun like any other. I brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into my favorite porcelain mug, and settled into the kitchen chair that had been mine for decades. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall were my only company, as they usually were these days. Retirement had slowed my life to a gentle rhythm, though the ache of loneliness after my husband passed still lingered like an echo in every room. When the phone rang, I thought little of it. My sister Patricia often called around that time, and her cheerful voice usually brightened my mornings. But when I picked up and heard my son's voice on the other end, my heart lifted in a different way. "Michael," I said warmly, though it had been weeks since I'd heard from him. "It's good to hear your voice. How are you, son?" There was a pause just long enough to send a ripple of unease down my spine. Then he cleared his throat. "Mom, I wanted to tell you, Vanessa and I got married yesterday." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him correctly. My mind tripped over the words as if they were in a language I didn't understand. "Married yesterday?" My hand tightened around the phone. You got married? Yesterday?" "Yes," he said, a hint of impatience in his tone. "We had a small ceremony. Just close friends." It was beautiful. I sat frozen, the kitchen spinning around me. "Michael," I whispered, "why wasn't I there? Why didn't you tell me?" Another pause. Then Vanessa's voice chimed in faintly in the background, smooth and dismissive. Michael hesitated before repeating her words. "Mom, we only invited the people who are really special to us. We wanted it to be intimate." The line went quiet, but the silence roared in my ears. Special people. My own son. The boy I had raised alone after his father died. The child I had poured every ounce of love and sacrifice into had declared that I was not among the special ones. I forced myself to speak, though my throat felt raw. "Michael, I don't understand. After everything, after all these years, you didn't even want me there?" His sigh carried no warmth. "Mum, please don't make this harder than it has to be. It was our decision. We wanted to start our life together without all the drama. That was what I was to him now. Not a mother, not family, just drama." The call ended soon after, leaving me gripping the receiver as if it might anchor me to reality. When I finally set it down, my hands were trembling. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, untouched. I stared at the yellowed photographs on the wall. Michael as a child with a missing front tooth. Michael in his high school cap and gown. Michael at college graduation with my arm proudly around his shoulders. Every image was a snapshot of sacrifice. The nights I worked late as a teacher to pay his tuition, the meals I skipped to cover his rent, the jewelry I pawned to keep his car from being repossessed. All those years, I had convinced myself that my sacrifices meant something, that love and loyalty were being built brick by brick. Now it seemed those bricks had been torn down in a single day, leaving me standing in the rubble. Later that evening, Patricia came by. She found me at the kitchen table, staring at a legal pad covered with scribbled numbers. I had been trying to tally it all, the checks, the transfers, the favors that had cost me more than money. She sat down beside me, her hand covering mine. "Gloria," she said softly, "what are you doing?" "I'm adding it up," I murmured. "Everything I've given him. Everything I sacrificed. I thought it was for love. But I guess I was wrong." Patricia's eyes shone with both pity and fire. "You weren't wrong to love him, but he's wrong to treat you this way. And maybe it's time you stopped carrying him." Her words cut through the fog like a blade. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but she was right. I had carried Michael on my back for decades, never questioning how heavy the load had become. Now, he had not only let me stumble, he had shoved me aside. That night, lying in bed, I whispered to the empty room, "I may not be special to them, but I will be special to myself." It was the first flicker of resolve, small, fragile, but alive. The morning after Michael's call, I awoke to a silence that felt heavier than usual. The house had always been quiet since my husband Robert passed away, but that day the stillness seemed to press against me, as if the walls themselves carried judgment. I shuffled into the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat again at the same table where the night before I had written and rewritten figures on my yellow legal pad. The columns of numbers stared back at me. Tuition payments, car loans, rent checks, vacations. My handwriting had grown jagged and uneven as the totals climbed. I had stopped at $38,000, though I knew there was more I hadn't accounted for. I lifted the pen again, my hand trembling, and added the smaller things. Groceries, clothes, holiday gifts that were meant to help him fit in with friends who had more than we did. When the ink finally stopped, the number staring back at me was staggering. Nearly $42,000. $42,000 poured into my son's life, and yet he hadn't thought me worthy to witness his wedding vows. I sat back, staring at the pad until my eyes blurred. I thought of Robert then, his soft warnings over the years. "Gloria," he had told me more than once, "don't make it too easy on him. If you keep carrying him, he'll never learn to walk on his own." I had brushed him off, convinced that protecting Michael was my duty, a mother's job. But now, with Robert gone and Michael lost to me in another way, I wondered if I had failed us both. The memories came unbidden, sharp as glass. I saw myself years earlier standing in the grocery store counting coins, deciding which items I could put back so I could afford Michael's textbooks. I remembered staying up late, grading papers from my students at the kitchen table while my son slept peacefully, knowing his bills would be covered because I had worked another after-school tutoring job. I recalled the time his car was repossessed and he called me in tears. I went to the pawn shop the next morning with Robert's watch, the one he had worn to our wedding and treasured his whole life. The pawnbroker gave me just enough to cover the payment. Robert never scolded me, but the sorrow in his eyes that evening had been worse than any rebuke. I pressed my hands to my face. How had I convinced myself that all this giving was love? How had I not seen that it was slowly hollowing me out? Later that day, Patricia stopped by again. She carried a casserole, as if feeding me could fix the hollowness inside. I showed her the legal pad, the endless columns of sacrifice. She read silently, her lips pressed into a firm line. "Gloria," she said finally, her voice low but steady, "you've given him more than some parents would in a lifetime." And what did he give back? Exclusion? Cruel words. Do you see it now? I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. I thought I was protecting him, but maybe I was protecting him from reality, and in doing so, I ruined his respect for me. Patricia reached across the table, gripping my hand. "It's not too late to stop. You don't owe him another dollar, not another ounce of yourself." Her words burned into me. That night, I sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. I thought of the holidays when Michael had arrived empty-handed, smiling as he accepted gifts without once asking how I could afford them. I thought of Vanessa, always with her perfect nails and designer bags, thanking me with a cool smile whenever I covered their shortfall. And now I saw it clearly. I had trained them to expect it. I had built their world of ease with my own hands, and they had mistaken my sacrifice for weakness. I whispered into the fire as if Robert could still hear me. "You were right. I should have stopped long ago." The flames flickered, casting shadows on the walls. For the first time in decades, I admitted something I had never dared say aloud. I was not just a mother. I was also a woman who deserved peace, respect, and independence. By the time I went to bed, a seed of resolve had taken root inside me. Small, yes. Fragile, perhaps, but alive. The next day, I opened my checkbook and made a decision. I would write no more checks to Michael, no more transfers, no more sacrifices that bled me dry. If he wanted a life with Vanessa, he would have to build it without me. The decision not to send another dime to Michael sat heavy in my chest for days, like a stone I couldn't swallow. It was the right choice. I knew that deep in my bones, but it didn't make it easier. For more than 40 years, I had defined myself as Michael's provider, his safety net, his fallback when the world was too harsh. Without that role, who was I? But the answer came sooner than I expected. It was late one evening when the phone rang. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, a half-read novel resting in my lap. When I recognized Michael's number, my stomach tightened. I considered letting it ring, but some old instinct still compelled me to answer. "Mom," he said, his voice brisk as though we'd spoken yesterday. "The rent's due next week. Did you send it through already?" I haven't seen it clear. I closed my eyes. This was the moment I had dreaded. "No, Michael," I said softly but firmly. "There won't be any more transfers. I've decided I can't keep supporting you." Silence stretched on the line, thick and heavy. Then came his laugh, sharp, humorless. "What are you talking about?" "You've always helped me. Don't start this now. Vanessa and I are building our life. We're counting on you." Something in me stiffened. "That's just it, Michael. You shouldn't be counting on me. You're a grown man with a wife and responsibilities. It's time you handled them without me." His tone shifted, anger creeping in. "So, now you're abandoning me? After everything, you're really going to cut me off?" The word abandon stung like a slap. "I've never abandoned you," I said quietly. "I've carried you for far too long. But I can't keep sacrificing my life while you treat me like I'm nothing. You didn't even invite me to your wedding, Michael. You said I wasn't special. Do you know how that felt?" He muttered something under his breath, then raised his voice. "Vanessa was right about you. You always make everything about yourself. We wanted a simple wedding. It wasn't about you." Hot tears blurred my vision, but my voice held steady. "And yet, I've made my life about you since the day you were born. Every decision, every sacrifice, every dollar. That ends now," he snapped, his words sharp and cruel. "Fine. If you want to sit alone in that old house and rot, go ahead. Don't expect us to come running when you need us." The line went dead. I sat in stunned silence, the receiver still pressed against my ear. My hand trembled, but not with fear, with grief. My son's voice, the same voice that once called me mommy with love, now dripped with disdain. I set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked with the cold, but all I felt was the burn of his words. Later that night, Patricia called. She didn't know yet what had happened, but she heard the heaviness in my voice. When I told her about the conversation, she didn't mince words. "Good," she said firmly. "It's about time you told him no. He may rage now, Gloria, but you've given him no reason to grow up. You've done enough," I wanted to believe her. But lying in bed later, I replayed Michael's anger again and again. The boy I raised, the boy I adored, now sounded like a stranger. The next morning, Vanessa called. Her voice was sweet at first, almost sickeningly so. "Gloria, dear, I heard you and Michael had a disagreement. You can't mean what you said. You know we need you. Think of it as investing in our future." Her words made my skin crawl. "Vanessa, I'm not an investor in your marriage. I'm a mother, and I deserve to be treated like one, not like a bank account." The sweetness in her tone vanished. "You're making a mistake, Gloria. You'll regret this. People who cut off their family end up alone." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the silent phone. I stood there for a long moment before walking to the yellow pad on my table. I wrote down both conversations word for word, every insult, every threat. If Michael and Vanessa thought they could twist my reality, they were wrong. I would have the truth in black and white. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the bare trees swaying in the wind. My heart ached, but my resolve deepened. Michael thought my silence had always meant weakness. He was about to learn that it meant strength. The days following those heated phone calls with Michael and Vanessa passed in a blur, each one heavy with the weight of their words. Their anger echoed in my mind long after the conversations ended, but beneath the sting, something unexpected began to stir inside me. For years, I had lived under the illusion that silence meant peace, that saying nothing would keep harmony. Now I saw the truth. My silence had been a permission slip, and they had used it to take more and more until there was nothing left of me. On the third morning after, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, shadows stretching across the floor as the first pale light crept through the curtains. I made a pot of coffee and stood at the kitchen counter, my yellow legal pad in front of me. Instead of adding numbers this time, I wrote a single sentence at the top. I will no longer be their victim. The words looked small at first, almost fragile, but as I traced them again with the tip of my pen, they grew bold. Something inside me shifted. I spent the day making quiet but deliberate changes. I visited the bank, where I asked the clerk to cancel every automatic transfer to Michael's account. The woman behind the counter looked at me curiously, as though she wanted to ask questions, but I simply smiled and said, "Family matters." I changed my online banking password and updated the security questions to things only I would know. Walking out of that bank, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering how much Michael and Vanessa would demand. Next. That evening, Patricia came by with her usual casserole, though I hadn't touched the one she'd brought earlier in the week. She found me sitting at the table with my notes spread around me. "What's all this?" she asked, setting the dish down. "Evidence," I said simply. "If Michael and Vanessa think they can twist the truth, I'll be ready. I've started writing down every conversation, every message, every word they throw at me." Patricia nodded, her eyes sharp. "Good. You'll need it. Don't think for a second they'll stop here. They've gotten used to you being their lifeline. Now they'll scramble and they'll strike harder when they realize you mean it." Her bluntness might have unsettled me once, but now it only fueled the fire inside. "Then let them try," I replied, surprising myself with the firmness of my voice. That night, as I sat in bed with my journal on my lap, I thought about Robert again. How many times had he warned me gently, never cruelly, that I was giving too much? He had seen what I couldn't, that my endless sacrifices weren't teaching Michael to be strong, they were teaching him to depend. I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence. "I should have listened to you sooner, but I'm listening now." The next day brought another test. Michael called, his voice thick with barely contained anger. "Mom, Vanessa told me what you said. You really think you can just cut us off? You owe us after everything you've done." "I owe you nothing," I said calmly, my hand steady on the receiver. There was a sharp inhale on his end. "We're your family." "And family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me," I said, my voice firmer now. "Family doesn't exclude their mother from their wedding. Family doesn't tell her she isn't special." His words came fast, sharp. "You're going to regret this." You'll see I wrote the conversation down the moment it ended, each word etched into the page like a shield. By the end of the week, I had pages filled with notes, calls, threats, insults, manipulations. It wasn't just documentation, it was my testimony, a record that I had lived through this storm and chosen to stand. Margaret, my neighbour, stopped me at the mailbox one afternoon. She was a kind woman with a warm smile, the type who always asked how you were and truly wanted to know the answer. She noticed my weary expression and asked gently, "Gloria, are you all right?" For a moment I hesitated. Then I told her, not every detail, but enough. Her smile faded into a look of quiet outrage. "That's cruel," she said firmly. "You've always been nothing but giving. If they're trying to tear you down, don't think you're alone. You've got friends here who see the truth." Her words stayed with me long after I walked back into the house. Maybe I wasn't alone, after all. That night, I wrote a final note in my Journal before turning out the light. I will not bow to fear. I will fight for my dignity. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply, my dreams free from their voices. It didn't take long for Michael and Vanessa to realize I was serious. Once the transfers stopped, the storm arrived. It began with late-night phone calls. At first, Michael's voice carried a thin edge of disbelief. "Mom, the payment didn't go through. Did you forget?" He laughed awkwardly, as if the idea of me cutting him off was a silly mistake. When I told him no, that I had ended the support, the laughter vanished. "You can't just stop," he snapped. "I've got bills due. Rent, credit cards, Vanessa's student loans." I cut him off gently but firmly. "Michael, those are your responsibilities, not mine." The silence on the other end was chilling. Then his voice dropped low. "You're choosing this? To leave me stranded?" "I'm choosing myself," I whispered, though my hands trembled after I hung up. The next day, Vanessa called. Her tone was syrupy sweet, her words dripping with condescension. "Gloria, darling, I think you've misunderstood. Michael and I aren't asking for charity. We're building a future. You're part of that future." "You always have been Vanessa," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've been part of your present, paying for it piece by piece. But your future? That's yours to build." Her sweetness dissolved in an instant. "If you think you can just cut us off, you'll regret it. Families take care of each other. Do you want people to think you're cruel? That you've abandoned your only son?" The line went dead after that. But her words hung in the air like smoke. For hours I walked through the house, replaying them, questioning myself. Was I cruel? Was I abandoning him? But then I looked at the yellow legal pad, the endless column of figures. Nearly $42,000. I thought of all the nights I'd gone without so he could have more. No, I was not cruel. I had been more generous than most. It was they who had confused generosity with servitude. A few evenings later, the storm escalated. I was knitting in the living room when a knock rattled the front door. My heart jumped. When I peered through the peephole, I saw them. Michael, red-faced, fists jammed into his pockets, and Vanessa standing rigid beside him, her arms crossed tightly. I opened the door only partway, leaving the chain in place. "What do you want?" Michael's eyes were wild. "We need to talk. Face to face. Let us in." "No," I said firmly. "Say what you need from there." Vanessa's voice was smooth but cold. "Gloria, this is ridiculous. We're family. We shouldn't be shouting through a locked door like strangers." "Then you should have treated me like family," I replied. Family doesn't exclude a mother from her son's wedding. Family doesn't call. Her drama. And family doesn't drain her dry. Michael's face hardened. "You've changed. You're not the mom I knew. You're letting Patricia and that nosy neighbor fill your head." The anger in me flared. "No, Michael. I'm finally thinking for myself. For once in my life, I'm not letting you dictate what I do." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You're going to regret this. You think you can just cut the cord, but you need us. You're old. You're alone. Who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself?" His words stung, but instead of crumbling, I felt steel rise in my chest. "Not you," I said, my voice calm but icy. "Never you. I'd rather be alone than in the hands of people who see me as a burden or a wallet." For a moment, even Vanessa's expression faltered. Then she grabbed Michael's arm. "We're wasting our time. Let's go." They turned and stormed off, their footsteps crunching against the gravel. I stood at the door until their car pulled away, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. But when the quiet returned, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't afraid. I was angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But fear had finally left me. That night, Patricia came over as soon as I told her what happened. She sat with me at the kitchen table, her eyes blazing. "They came to your door?" "Gloria, that's harassment. You need to protect yourself. I already started, I said, showing her the entries in my notebook. Every call, every word, every threat, it's all here. If they want to fight, I'll be ready. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You've carried him long enough. Now it's time to carry yourself. When she left, I lingered by the window, looking out at the quiet street. For decades, my life had revolved around Michael, every choice tied to his needs. Now, for the first time, I felt something shift. It wasn't just about stopping the money. It was about reclaiming myself, my voice, my choices, my dignity. I closed my notebook that night with a final thought scrawled across the page. The cord is cut. There's no going back. The first snowfall of the season had blanketed the neighborhood in a hush of white. From my front window, the street looked peaceful, every roof dusted with powder, every branch lined with frost. For the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile sense of calm. The notebook on my kitchen table was nearly full, each page a record of threats and insults. Writing everything down had become more than protection. It was a ritual of survival. But peace, I was learning, never lasted long when Michael and Vanessa were involved. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. I had just settled into my armchair with a book when the sound of my front door rattling jolted me upright. I froze, listening. The knob turned sharply once, then again. My heart raced as I realized someone was trying to get in. I rushed to the door. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "It's us, Mom." Michael's voice barked from the other side. "Open the door." Panic surged. I hadn't given him a key in years, but I knew how stubborn he could be. "Michael, you can't just show up here and try to force your way in." Vanessa's voice chimed in, sharp and commanding. "We're family, Gloria. We have every right to be here. Stop acting like a stranger." I steadied my breath, pressing my back against the door. "You do not have the right to barge into my home. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." There was silence for a moment. Then Michael's voice low and simmering. "You're pushing us too far. You're not thinking clearly. We're here to take care of things before you make a mess of them." My knees trembled, but something hot and fierce flared in my chest. "You mean take control? You're not here for me, you're here for yourselves. And you're not coming in." The door rattled again, harder this time. I shouted, "I'm dialing the police right now." At that, the noise stopped. I heard Vanessa mutter something angrily, and then their footsteps retreated across the porch. A moment later, the sound of their car starting pierced the silence, and they were gone. I slid down against the door, my whole body trembling. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't just from fear, they were from rage. How dare they? How dare they try to invade the one place where I should have felt safe? That evening, Patricia rushed over when I called her. She found me still shaken, the notebook open in front of me. "They tried to break in?" she gasped. "Gloria, that's crossing a line." I nodded, my voice hoarse. "They said they had a right." "Like I don't even own my own home," Patricia's jaw set. "Then it's time you stop handling this alone. You need real protection, a lawyer, someone who can stand between you and their madness." Her words struck deep. I had always prided myself on handling my own problems, but now I saw that this was bigger than me. Michael and Vanessa weren't going to stop. If anything, they were escalating. The next morning, I gathered my folder, bank statements, my yellow pad of financial sacrifices, the notebook of threats. With my scarf wrapped tight against the cold, I walked into the office of Charles Bennett, a local attorney whose reputation for honesty and sharpness was well known in town. His office was warm, lined with bookshelves and heavy with the smell of leather and coffee. He greeted me with a firm handshake, his expression kind but focused. "Mrs. Matthews, what brings you here today?" I sat across from him, my folder clutched in my hands like a lifeline. For the first time, I laid it all out. The wedding I wasn't invited to, Michael's cruel words, the years of financial support, the threats, the confrontation at my door. When I finished, my voice was raw. Charles leaned back, his brow furrowed. "Gloria, What you've described is not just unkindness, it's coercion, it's exploitation, and now it's harassment. If they tried to force entry into your home, that's a criminal matter. His words sent a chill through me, but also something steadier, validation. This wasn't all in my head. This wasn't just family drama. It was real, and it was dangerous. Charles continued, "You did the right thing by documenting everything. That notebook may be your strongest weapon. From here, we'll prepare for the possibility of court. But first, I'll send them a formal notice. No more attempts to contact you directly. Any further communication must go through my office. And if they trespass again, you call the police immediately. Do you understand?" I nodded, relief and fear warring inside me. I understand. When I left his office, the winter air stung my face, but I walked with more purpose than I had in months. For too long, I had been reacting, surviving their attacks one by one. Now, with Charles Bennett in my corner, I was ready to fight back. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, I thought about the boy Michael once was. The boy who used to slip his small hand into mine when crossing the street, who once brought me a dandelion bouquet from the yard. I grieved that boy deeply, but the man who had stood on my porch, demanding his way into my home, was no longer that child. He was a stranger. I closed my notebook with a final note scrawled across the page. They came to my door today, but they did not win. This house is mine. My life is mine, and I will not surrender either. The letter came on a grey December morning, slipped neatly into my mailbox between the gas bill and a holiday catalogue. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Cream paper, a typed envelope, my name written cleanly across the front. But when I slid it open with my letter knife, my stomach clenched. The letterhead bore the name of a law firm I didn't recognize, and the words inside made my hands tremble. It was a notice from an attorney named Stephen Marks representing Michael and Vanessa. The tone was clinical, but the message was unmistakable. They intended to pursue guardianship over me. According to their claims, I was no longer fit to handle my own affairs. They alleged forgetfulness, instability, financial recklessness, lies wrapped in legal language. My knees went weak, and I sank into the nearest chair, the letter fluttering in my lap. Guardianship. They weren't just trying to pressure me anymore. They wanted to take everything, my decisions, my bank account, my home, my life. I stared out the kitchen window, my breath fogging in the cold air. It felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I thought of all the years I had poured into Michael's life, all the sacrifices I had made so he wouldn't have to struggle. And now, this was how he repaid me, by trying to erase me. I called Patricia first. My sister's voice grew sharp with outrage as I read her the letter. Guardianship? Gloria, that's outrageous. You're sharper than half the people in this town. This isn't care. This is theft dressed up as concern. I swallowed hard. They've already hired a lawyer. That means they're serious. Then you'd better be just as serious, Patricia said firmly. Call Charles. Show him the letter. So I did. When I sat across from Charles Bennett later that day, he read the document with his brows furrowed. His expression hardened. I suspected they might move in this direction, he admitted. Guardianship cases are not easy to win, but if they're determined, they can drag you through months of misery. My heart sank. What do we do? He folded the letter neatly and set it aside. We fight. First, we'll gather proof of your competence. Medical evaluations, financial records, witness testimony. People in your community who know you're independent and capable. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case. The word case echoed in my mind. I had never imagined being in a courtroom, let alone fighting against my own son. Yet here I was, preparing for battle not against a stranger, but against the boy I once cradled in my arms. That evening, as snow fell quietly outside, the phone rang again. It was Michael. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. Mom, I just want you to understand. This is for your own good. You're not thinking straight anymore. Vanessa and I only want to protect you." "Protect me?" I snapped, my voice trembling with both anger and disbelief. "By taking away my rights? By calling me incompetent? That's not protection, Michael. That's betrayal." His tone sharpened. "You're being manipulated. Patricia and that lawyer of yours are filling your head with paranoia. Vanessa and I are your real family. We should be the ones making decisions for you." My grip tightened on the phone. "No, Michael. Real family doesn't lock you out of their wedding. Real family doesn't bleed you dry. Real family doesn't try to steal your life." There was silence, then a low growl. "You'll regret this, Mom. When the judge sees how irrational you are, you'll have no choice but to hand everything over." I hung up before his words could sink deeper, my hand shaking as I wrote the conversation down in my notebook. Every insult, every threat, every attempt to twist reality, I would not let them vanish into the air. A few days later, another blow arrived. A knock at the door revealed a woman with a clipboard and badge. "Rachel Ortiz from Adult Protective Services." "Mrs. Matthews," she said gently, "we received a report with concerns about your ability to care for yourself. I'd like to ask you some questions." The blood drained from my face. I knew exactly who had filed that report. Michael and Vanessa were trying to paint me as incapable from every angle. I invited Rachel inside. She asked about my finances, my medications, my routines. I showed her my neatly organized pill box, my balanced checkbook, the casserole Patricia had dropped off still warm in the kitchen. I answered every question calmly, though inside my heart thundered. When she finished, Rachel smiled faintly. "Mrs. Matthews, you're doing just fine. The report doesn't match the reality I see here. I'll be closing this case." Relief coursed through me, though the sting of betrayal remained sharp. After she left, I sat down at my table, staring at the snow drifting past the window. My own son had filed a false report to strip me of dignity. That night, I whispered into the quiet, "They may think I'm weak, but I will show them how strong I can be." The morning after Rachel Ortiz closed her case, I felt a flicker of relief, like a candle lit in the dark. But it was a fragile flame. If Michael and Vanessa had already filed false reports and hired a lawyer, I knew they weren't going to stop. They would circle back with new schemes, new accusations, new ways to chip away at my dignity. Charles Bennett had been clear. Guardianship isn't granted on one report or one story. But if they build a narrative, if they gather evidence from enough people, the judge will have to consider it. We'll need to counter every move. So, I began building defenses. That week, I walked to the pharmacy to refill my prescription. The air was sharp with winter, my boots crunching against ice. Inside, the warmth of the shop wrapped around me like a blanket. Edward Johnson, the pharmacist, looked up from the counter with his usual easy smile. "Mrs. Matthews," he greeted, "good to see you. How have you been holding up?" I hesitated before answering. Finally, I lowered my voice. "Edward, I need to ask you something unusual. Did my son come here recently, asking questions about me?" Edward's smile faded into a frown. "He did, actually. A week ago. Wanted to know if you'd been missing doses, getting confused about your prescriptions." He shook his head firmly. I told him the truth, that you've always been meticulous. You never miss a refill, and you're more organized than half my customers 20 years younger. A knot in my chest loosened. "Thank you, Edward. That means more than I can say. If you need me to testify, I will," he said, his voice steady. "I don't like people trying to twist reality." Later that afternoon, I stopped by Samuel Wright's hardware store. I needed fresh batteries for the security cameras I'd installed after Michael tried to force his way into my house. Samuel rang me up, then leaned across the counter. "Gloria, mind if I ask, what's going on with your boy? He and that wife of his came in here asking questions about you. Wanted me to say you looked confused buying supplies, like maybe you didn't know what you were doing." My heart sank. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth," Samuel said firmly. "I told them you walked in here last month, bought locks and cameras, and even asked good questions about installation. I said you knew exactly what you were doing. His eyes narrowed. They didn't like that answer, but I don't care. You've always been sharp as a tack. Don't let them convince you otherwise. By the time I walked home, my cheeks stung from the cold, but inside I felt warmed by something stronger than relief. Support. Michael and Vanessa might be whispering lies, but my community knew me. They had seen me for years, capable, steady, independent. Their voices mattered. That evening, I invited Patricia and Dorothy King, my longtime neighbor, over for tea. The three of us sat around the table, steam rising from our mugs. I told them about Edward, about Samuel, about the lies Michael and Vanessa were trying to spread. They came to me too, Dorothy said, her eyes flashing. Vanessa stopped me in the driveway last week, asking if I'd noticed you leaving the stove on or forgetting to lock your door. I told her she was out of line. I said, I've known you for over 20 years, and you've always been careful, always competent. I told her if she wanted to gossip, she could do it somewhere else. Tears pricked my eyes, though I blinked them back. Dorothy, thank you. Patricia leaned forward, her voice fierce. Gloria, do you see now? You're not alone. They may have lawyers, but you have people who will stand beside you. That's just as powerful. Her words stayed with me long after they left. That night, I added a new section to my notebook, not just the threats and manipulations, but the allies. I wrote their names: Edward Johnson, Samuel Wright, Dorothy King. I listed what each had said, each truth spoken in my defense. It felt like laying bricks in a wall, a fortress against the lies. The following day, I met again with Charles. He listened carefully as I recounted everything, then nodded. Excellent. Witnesses are invaluable in cases like this. The judge won't just want your word, she'll want proof that people in your community can vouch for your competence. These testimonies may carry more weight than you realize. For the first time, I saw the faintest smile tug at his lips. Gloria, you're not just defending yourself anymore. You're building a case that shows exactly who they are. Manipulators. It's going to backfire on them. As I left his office, snowflakes swirled in the air, catching the light of the street lamps. For weeks, I had felt as though my world was shrinking, closing in on me with every new accusation. But now, with each person who spoke the truth, it felt as though the walls were pushing back out again. I wasn't boxed in anymore. I walked home with the cold nipping at my cheeks, my scarf wrapped tightly around me. Inside, I lit a fire in the hearth, watching the flames crackle to life. My notebook lay on the table, pages thick with pain and betrayal, but also with loyalty and support. For the first time in a long while, I whispered not a vow of fear or grief, but of strength. They may lie, they may scheme, but I am not alone, and the truth has allies. January arrived with bitter winds, the kind that rattled the windows and made the house groan in protest. I had hoped the holidays might cool Michael and Vanessa's fury, that perhaps the season of family and forgiveness would remind them of love. But if anything, it hardened them. The envelope came on a Tuesday morning, thicker than the last, its seal pressed tight. I knew before I opened it that it wasn't good news. My hands trembled as I slid the papers free. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Petition for guardianship of Gloria Matthews." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. They had done it. They had gone beyond threats, beyond whispers and false reports. They had dragged me into court, seeking to strip me of every freedom I had left. For several minutes, I just sat at the table, staring at the legal jargon I could barely process. Vanessa's name leapt from the page, listed as Michael's co-petitioner. Together, they were asking the court to declare me incapable of managing my affairs, to hand over my life as though it were an estate to be divided. The phone rang. It was Patricia. "Gloria?" she said, her voice urgent. I heard. Michael posted online about filing the petition. He's spinning it like it's an act of mercy, like you're some helpless widow who doesn't know what day it is. "Gloria, I am so angry I could scream." Her anger steadied me. "Patricia," I whispered, "they've gone too far this time. And I won't let them win. That afternoon, I carried the petition into Charles Bennett's office. He read it slowly, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. They're painting you as forgetful, reckless, unstable. They claim you've misplaced bills, neglected medications, even endangered yourself. All lies. But we'll dismantle each one. My voice trembled. How? Step by step, he said. First, we'll file our response. Then we'll gather testimony. Your doctor, your pharmacist, your neighbors, the people who know you. We'll show the judge not just who you are, but who they are. Opportunists exploiting the law for their own gain. His certainty gave me strength. I slid my notebook across the desk to him. Every word they've said, every threat, every insult, it's all here. He flipped through the pages, nodding. This is gold. It shows a pattern. Judges respect patterns, and we'll add to it bank statements, receipts, even your journals. The more organized you are, the more their story crumbles. Walking home that day, I felt the sting of winter on my face, but also something new: determination. If they wanted a courtroom, I would meet them there, not as a victim, but as a fighter. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. I visited Dr. Linda Carter, who greeted me warmly in her office. After a thorough exam, she handed me a signed statement. Gloria, your health is excellent. Your memory is sharp. I'll testify to that if needed. Edward Johnson, the pharmacist, put his promise into writing too. Never missed a refill. Always on time. Always organized. Samuel Wright gave me a letter on his hardware store letterhead. Mrs. Matthews is competent, independent, and decisive. She handles her own business. Even Dorothy King, my neighbor, volunteered to testify. If they think they can convince anyone you're incapable, they'll have to go through me first. With each statement, my wall of defense grew stronger. For every lie Michael and Vanessa spread, I now had a truth to counter it. Still, the nights were difficult. Sometimes I lay awake, the ceiling above me blurred by tears. I replayed Michael's childhood in my mind. The birthdays, the scraped knees, the nights I stayed up nursing him through fevers. How had that little boy become this man who now sought to erase me? One night, I found myself whispering into the dark, "Robert, if you can hear me, give me strength, because our son has become someone I don't recognize." The first court date was set for February. I circled it on my calendar, my pen pressing hard enough to tear the paper. On the morning of the hearing, Patricia drove me to the courthouse. My hands shook as I clutched my folder of documents, but my sister's presence steadied me. "Head high," she said firmly. "They want you to look small." Don't give them the satisfaction. Inside the courthouse, the air was heavy with tension. Michael and Vanessa were already there, seated beside their lawyer, Stephen Marks. Vanessa wore a smug smile, her hand resting possessively on Michael's arm. Michael avoided my eyes. Charles Bennett leaned close to me. "Remember, this is just the first hearing. Nothing will be decided today. We'll show them you're ready, and we'll be ready for trial if it comes to that." When the judge entered, Judge Helen Crawford, stern but fair-eyed, everyone rose. I studied her face, wondering if she could already sense the truth, if she could see through the web of lies. The session was brief. Stephen Marks spoke with smooth authority, painting me as vulnerable, confused, needing compassionate intervention. My blood boiled at his words. When Charles stood, his rebuttal was calm but firm. Mrs. Matthews is competent, independent, and fully capable of managing her own life. We will prove it. The judge set a trial date for March and adjourned. But as we left the courtroom, Vanessa's smile widened. She leaned close enough for me to hear her whisper, "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts." I held her gaze, my voice low but steady. "I intend to, and I'll keep it." March arrived with the heavy skies of late winter. On the morning of the trial, I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing down my navy blue dress. My hands trembled as I pinned Robert's old silver brooch at my collar. It wasn't jewelry this time, it was armor. I whispered to my reflection, "Stand tall, Gloria. You are not the one on trial here." Patricia drove me to the courthouse again, her hand resting on mine most of the way. "They'll try to rattle you," she warned. "But remember, the truth is on your side. Don't let their lies become your story." The courthouse steps loomed tall, but I climbed them with a steady pace. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Michael and Vanessa sat at the opposite table with Stephen Marks, their lawyer. Vanessa wore a tailored suit and a look of cool triumph. Michael glanced at me once, then quickly looked away. Judge Helen Crawford presided with quiet authority, her gaze sweeping the room as though she could see straight through the walls we all tried to build. Stephen Marks began, his words smooth as oil. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned for Mrs. Matthews' well-being. She has shown clear signs of confusion, forgetfulness, and mismanagement of finances. Out of love and duty, they are seeking guardianship to ensure her safety." The words made my blood boil. Out of love and duty? If love meant betrayal and duty meant theft, then perhaps he was right. Charles Bennett rose calmly, his presence steady, grounding me. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mrs. Matthews is fully capable of managing her life. What we have here is not a case of concern, but of exploitation. Her son and daughter-in-law have lived off her generosity for years, and now, when she has chosen to reclaim her independence, they are retaliating with false claims. We will prove she is competent, responsible, and deserving of full autonomy." The judge nodded. "Proceed with testimony." The first witness was Dr. Linda Carter. She testified clearly, her medical report in hand. "Mrs. Matthews is in excellent health for her age. She is lucid, organized, and in no way suffering from dementia or cognitive decline." Stephen Marks tried to press her. "Doctor, isn't it possible that stress or age could impair her judgment?" Dr. Carter's eyes sharpened. "Age is not impairment. Mrs. Matthews shows no signs of diminished capacity. None." Next came Edward Johnson, the pharmacist. He spoke plainly but firmly. "I've known Mrs. Matthews for years. She picks up her prescriptions on time, manages her refills without issue, and has never shown confusion about her medications. She is one of my most reliable customers." Then Samuel Wright took the stand. "I run the hardware store. Mrs. Matthews recently purchased security equipment, asked detailed questions, and installed it herself. That doesn't sound like someone who's incapable to me. She's resourceful, decisive, and careful. Even Dorothy King, my neighbor, testified. I've lived next door for 2 decades. Gloria is sharp, independent, and responsible. I've never once seen her show signs of neglect. What I have seen is her son and his wife circling like vultures." Each testimony felt like a stone placed in the wall, protecting me. Still, Michael and Vanessa had their turn. Michael took the stand, his voice shaking with feigned emotion. "Mom has been struggling," he said, looking down at his hands. "She forgets things. She gets overwhelmed. She's been manipulated by outsiders who don't understand her. We just want to help." Charles leaned close to me, whispering, "Don't react. Let him hang himself with his own words." Then Vanessa stepped up, her performance even grander. "Gloria is vulnerable," she said smoothly. "She leaves the stove on. She forgets bills. She locks herself out of the house. We fear for her safety. All we want is to protect her from herself." I nearly rose from my seat, but Charles placed a calming hand on my arm. "Patience," he murmured. When it was our turn, Charles called me to the stand. My heart hammered in my chest as I raised my hand and swore to tell the truth. I sat tall, my voice steady, though my palms were damp. "Mrs. Matthews," Charles began, "tell the court about your daily life." I spoke plainly. I described my routines, my organized finances, my balanced checkbook, my home maintenance. I told the truth, not in rehearsed lines, but in the simple way a woman lives her life. Then Charles asked, Why do you believe your son and daughter-in-law have filed this petition? My throat tightened, but I looked directly at the judge. Because I stopped paying for their life. For years, I carried them. I pawned my husband's watch to pay their bills. I worked nights to cover their rent. I gave and gave until there was nothing left for myself. And when I finally said no, they decided to punish me. This guardianship petition isn't about love. It's about control. They don't want to protect me. They want to own me. The courtroom was silent. Even Judge Crawford's expression softened slightly, though she said nothing. Stephen Marks rose for cross-examination, but his questions felt weak. Mrs. Matthews, isn't it true you've felt stressed recently? Of course, I said calmly. Who wouldn't feel stressed, being dragged into court by their own child? But stress doesn't make me incapable. When the testimonies ended, Judge Crawford announced she would review all evidence before issuing a ruling. The trial was over for now. As we filed out of the courtroom, Vanessa's glare cut through me, but it no longer pierced. Patricia squeezed my hand. You did it, Gloria. You told the truth. Now let the truth do its work. That night, I sat by the fire with my notebook open. The year's hunt shall come. Final entry of the day, written in bold letters. They tried to make me small in court today, but I stood tall, and I will not be broken. The weeks between the hearing and the verdict stretched on like years. Every morning I woke with a knot in my stomach, dreading the uncertainty of what lay ahead. I tried to fill the days with routine, tending the fireplace, knitting scarves for the church drive, taking walks through the snow-covered neighborhood. But beneath it all was the constant question, would I lose my freedom? Patricia called almost daily, her voice a steadying presence. Dorothy dropped by with soup. Edward waved whenever I passed the pharmacy window, his look of reassurance enough to lift me for hours. And still, the waiting gnawed at me. Then at last the day arrived. A letter from the courthouse summoned us back for the judge's ruling. Patricia drove me once more, her hand firm over mine as we pulled into the courthouse lot. Whatever happens, she said softly, you've already proven you're stronger than they ever imagined. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed voices. Michael and Vanessa sat at their table, Stephen Marks at their side. Vanessa's lips curled in a faint smile as though victory was certain. Michael looked nervous, his eyes darting toward me and then quickly away. When Judge Helen Crawford entered, the room rose. My heart pounded as I stood, then sat again, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The judge's voice was steady, each word crisp in the silence. I have reviewed the petition for guardianship of Mrs. Gloria Matthews, as well as the testimony and evidence presented. I held my breath. Guardianship is not to be taken lightly. It is a serious measure intended only for those who truly cannot manage their own affairs. In this case, the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Mrs. Matthews is capable, competent, and fully able to direct her own life. The petition is denied. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The words echoed in my ears. The petition is denied. Relief surged through me so strongly that tears spilled down my cheeks. Patricia squeezed my hand, whispering, "You did it." Judge Crawford wasn't finished. She turned her gaze to Michael and Vanessa. Furthermore, I am concerned about the motivations behind this petition. The court cannot ignore the pattern of financial dependence and the credible testimony regarding attempts to manipulate and control Mrs. Matthews. While no charges are before me today, I strongly advise the petitioners to reconsider their actions moving forward. Mrs. Matthews is not their responsibility, nor is she their property. Vanessa's face drained of color, her smile gone. Michael's head sank lower, shame flickering across his features, though whether it was true shame or just the sting of defeat, I could not tell. As the judge adjourned, I rose slowly, my knees trembling but my back straight. I felt taller than I had in years. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. This wasn't a case that made headlines, but for me, it was monumental. I breathed in the cold March air like it was the sweetest scent on earth. Patricia hugged me tightly. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free." But even as the relief washed over me, I knew it wasn't truly over. Michael and Vanessa would go home, lick their wounds, and look for another angle. People like them didn't surrender easily. Still, they had lost in the eyes of the law, and that mattered. It gave me ground to stand on, protection I had never had before. That evening, I lit a fire and sat alone in the glow. My notebook lay on the table beside me, thick with the story of months of betrayal. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, slowly, carefully, "Today, the court gave me back what was never theirs to take. My life, my independence, my name. Michael and Vanessa tried to reduce me to nothing, but I stood, and I will keep standing." I closed the notebook and pressed my hand over the cover as though sealing the vow within. For the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. Spring came slowly that year, the snow retreating in patches until the earth revealed itself again. Green shoots pushed through the soil in my garden, stubborn and alive, and I found myself out on the porch most mornings, watching the world thaw. For the first time in a long while, I felt that I was thawing too. The verdict had changed everything. No longer was I waking each day with dread of another letter or knock on the door. Instead, I woke with choice. My choices. What to eat, where to go, how to spend the hours of my life. The very things Michael and Vanessa had tried to claim as theirs were mine again, and I guarded them fiercely. Patricia came by often, her laughter filling the house. Dorothy brought fresh bread. Edward always had a smile ready when I visited the pharmacy, and Samuel still asked about the cameras I'd installed. My world, once narrowed to fear, had expanded again with allies, with friends who had proven their loyalty. But as my life grew fuller, I heard whispers of Michael and Vanessa's unraveling. Without my money, the cracks in their world widened quickly. The apartment rent fell behind. Vanessa sold handbags online, claiming it was a business venture. Michael bounced between short-lived jobs, always blaming someone else when things soured. The smug confidence they had once worn like armor was peeling away. Patricia, never one to hold her tongue, summed it up one afternoon as we sipped tea on my porch. "Gloria, your revenge came without you lifting a finger. They thought you were their foundation, but once you stepped away, their house crumbled. That's the justice they earned." Her words settled in me like sunlight. Revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was quiet. It was living well while those who wronged you flailed in the mess they had built. I didn't need to gloat, but I did allow myself small, private moments of satisfaction. When I walked past the boutique where Vanessa used to shop, I noticed she no longer went inside. When Michael called once, just once, to ask if I might reconsider helping them, just this once, I let the silence stretch until he muttered goodbye. I wrote the date in my notebook, underlined it, and turned the page. My life moved forward. I joined a book club at the library, something I had always wanted but never done because I was too busy bailing Michael out of his disasters. I planted roses in the backyard, their buds slowly unfurling in the warmer air. I even began planning a trip Patricia had always dreamed of. A train ride through the Rockies, just us two sisters, free to marvel at the wide country stretching before us. One evening, I sat by the fire with my notebook in hand, flipping through the filled pages. Each line told a story, threats, lies, manipulations, but also the words of friends who had stood up for me, the truth that had anchored me in the storm. At the very end, I wrote my final entry. They tried to strip me of my dignity. They tried to silence me, to steal the very life I had built. But I fought and I won. My revenge is not in their ruin, though it has come. My revenge is in my freedom. My revenge is in every day I live as myself, unbroken. I closed the notebook, set it on the shelf, and let the fire warm my face. The crackling flames no longer felt like a mirror of turmoil, but a symbol of renewal, steady, bright, and alive. As I sat there, I thought of Robert. I could almost hear his voice, soft and certain. "You're stronger than you know, Gloria." I smiled. For the first time in years, I believed it. The cords that had bound me to Michael's demands were cut. The weight that had bent my shoulders for decades was gone. I was free, free to choose, free to breathe, free to live. And I intended to live well.